just say, oh, I'm going to wait until the class starts, then I'll press the enter key. Of course, then I'll forget when it's time to press the enter key. All right, so bad news first. Okay, this is kind of bad news and good news depending on how you look at it. This is there's always that, right? This is our last class meeting. Okay, I thought it was next Thursday, so I always count it and say, oh, we have 1 week more than we actually have. So that kind of threw my schedule into chaos because I thought there's one more class meeting. As it turns out, this is our actually last class meeting, but the semester for the first 8 weeks does not end until next Wednesday. We're just 1 day short to have another class meeting, which I would much prefer. Okay, so that's kind of the bad news. But if you don't like to come here, then it's good news, right? So that's the bad news and good news. So the other thing is I still have the material. Okay, the material is here, and I have released the 2 quizzes that are related to the material that I do want to make sure that I cover before the end of the first 8 weeks. And then the other part has to do with after this class ends next Wednesday, I cannot give you any additional work that is going to be graded. Okay, that's basically just the legal stuff. Okay, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to take the website down and stop responding to your email. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to give you guys additional material when I have time to work on it. You can still use the forum to communicate with me. So in case you're doing something like this at work, or you're curious about certain topics and you want to expand it some more, we can still do that, okay? But it's not going to be used for grading purposes at all. So for people who just want to go to a class to get a grade, they're done, okay? But for people who are kind of curious and, I encountered this at work, it's related to Linux security, you can always ask that question. I may not have the answer, okay? But, we can still use the forums to communicate. So I'll keep that running until the end of the semester. So there'll be another 8 weeks before I take this down. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So which is the last graded section?
The last graded section is I graded the the journal, the outside assessment journal. That is graded. If you get a score that is not 100%, go fix it so that you can have a better score. Okay. I left comment. Okay, so you basically want to read the instructions carefully and make sure that you have all the components that I'm looking for. Okay, which is most people miss a few components. Yep.
The inside assessment, is that supposed to be hard?
The inside assessment is open at this point.
Okay.
So you want to do that one too. So the inside assessment journal is open. And then there are some additional quizzes that are open as well. So when you look at upcoming events, it lists Clam FS, is due today, but I can extend the due date if you guys need more time. But remember, I cannot take anything after next Wednesday for grading purposes.
Can you extend the Clam FS until Wednesday, please?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wednesday midnight or Wednesday morning?
You have the entire Wednesday. Yep. Yep. So that's a good question. Okay. So Thursday midnight is the cutoff. Yep.
I'm assuming that using Snort's not going to be part of the course anymore.
Okay, if you look at this, using Snort is going to be due on Wednesday too.
Okay.
Yep. But that one is actually pretty easy. Okay.
Okay.
Once we know how to use Nmap, the Snort experiment is really just a few steps.
Okay.
Yep. We spend a lot of time to make the infrastructure work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that's kind of nice in a way because now you guys can actually have a platform to do your own investigation. If you read about something and you say, oh, I want to try this out, okay? I want to try out this trick with Nmap to see if I can, poke that port, or I want to try this, hacker, script, to hack into a system. Then you can download the virtual machine. Most virtual machines based on a free operating system like Linux or BSD, they can run in QEMU.
Okay.
So you can run QEMU, set up your VDE as a private internal network. Then you can run the script, the hacking script against the virtual machine, and you can do your own experiment that way. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. Remind me to re-release Clam.
My question, what are you grading through?
Sorry?
What are you grading through? IDS, that section? Is that the last section? you're
That's the
grading?
last section. Yep.
Alright.
So we are going to go over everything except there's nothing for the final exam. So I will
Okay.
only use the quizzes up to this point to do it.
Okay.
Is that okay? All right.
I want a final exam.
You want a final exam. And I shall give you one.
What's the final exam like, the quizzes that we've been taking so far?
The final exam is going to be based on, I will make it a multiple choice one, okay? But it will basically be testing your understanding of the major concepts that we have talked about in this class. So it's a concept-based type of exam. In terms of time, I will give you guys plenty of time, like duration of the exam. You will have plenty of duration to do it. But once you start, you might have like 3 hours to work on it, which I think is a lot of time.
How many questions?
That I have not decided yet. Yep, that I have not decided yet.
And will we get the results as soon as it's done, or is it something you'll grade later?
Okay, that is a good question. Because it's not going to be done here, so it's not a face-to-face
Right.
type of assessment. So I probably will have to make it so that the answers will only be disclosed after the due date of the exam. So this is a one try only, but during the time you can use the internet to do your research. So you can use Wikipedia, you can use the instruction on Moodle itself, you can use a textbook if you want to. So it's open book, open notes, and basically open internet, except for collaboration during the exam. Okay.
So that exam that you're making for the final,
Yeah.
when is that going to be up?
I will work on it over the weekend.
Okay.
So it won't be up tonight for sure. Okay, I'll work on it tomorrow, starting tomorrow. But it will be based on stuff that we have talked about in this class, because I know what we have talked about. We have all the videos, right? So I know what we have talked about, but it will be mostly based on concepts. It's not going to be based on the syntax of commands. It's like, okay, find out, where is the problem of this command? That is not what I'm going to ask. It will be mostly concept based, which is easy in a way, but hard in a different way. Okay, it's easy in a way that you don't have to memorize a lot of stuff. But the difficult part is you do have to understand the concepts to answer those questions. Okay.
Can I mention something?
Yep.
I was trying to set up the Clam file system
Mm-hmm.
tonight, and I created a separate folder and everything following the instructions. I couldn't quite get it. I think maybe I wasn't clear on adding the user, I guess, so I could access it. Or I
Okay.
can't see that the Clam P daemon is running.
Okay, so the Clam FS stuff is over here. The instruction to do it is actually in Clam FS theory and application.
Right.
Some of the step-by-step stuff is in the experiment itself, which is in the form of a quiz. So when you, okay, I'll just go ahead and click on this one and we'll check it out. All right, so in this one, there's the group membership that we talked about. Remember that? As root, use the add user command to do this, and we have to add to the two groups. One is called Fuse, and the other one is Clam AV. One of the group does not exist, so Clam AV does not exist. It's just Fuse that you have to add.
Okay, I think that's why I started with Clam AV and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, Clam FS. For some reason, Clam AV does not exist anymore. There's no such group.
So to when I'm adding to that, the group of Fuse, though, do I have to go to the location where it's mounted, or?
No, but you are just adding a user to the group. Now remember, this is also non-volatile, so that means every time you do the experiment, you have to do this step. Okay, let me just show you what I mean by that. Okay, so we'll open a new tab here. ID user, that will show the user of the ID and all the group memberships, right? So right now, there's no group membership whatsoever. So what you need to do is to change to super user and then use the add user command to add the user, okay, to the group that you're adding the user to. In this case, it's Fuse. Fuse does not exist either. Clam AV. Okay, so Clam AV is there and then Fuse is not. If you cannot find Clam AV, that means you're running an older version of the ISO.
I'm going to do one.
you're running the new one, then you should be able to run the second command.
I can do Clam AV, but not use,
But not fuse, right? Okay. And I think Clam AV is the only one that you need.
I think I was
Yep.
thinking I needed a bunch of options, or it was a read, write, elevate, or something. It really just doesn't. I'm just joining the group. I'm not trying to elevate privileges. It's not
No,
like change
you're just
logs.
joining the group. You're just basically saying the user is now a member of the group
Oh, it works
Clam
fine
AV.
now. Yeah,
Yep.
great.
Okay. All
So
right.
fuse is not required for any of this rest of the work, right?
Correct. Yep. Okay, so that is that. And let's see, what else are we gonna talk about?
But you're saying it's not persistent. My adding to the group, though.
Right, because there's one file that is responsible to track group membership is /etc/group. But that file is not in the persistent portion of our configuration for a good reason, okay? Because I cannot make, excuse me, I cannot make only certain files persistent. If I make that file persistent, then everything under /etc is going to be persistent. Now /etc is kind of like the Windows registry, so it includes stuff about the devices that you have, or devices that are exposed at this point to the operating system, and many other configuration files. So that means if a file is corrupted in /etc, the corruption will now be persistent as well. So next time you use the virtual machine, not the virtual machine, the live environment, you will end up with the same problem, and it will be much harder to fix those problems. By making /etc itself non-persistent, that means every time you restart the live environment, it will start with a fresh copy of healthy configuration files. So yes, you will have to go through you have to go through certain steps over and over again because it's not persistent. But at the same time, you won't end up with problems that are really hard to diagnose. So the trade-off is just that. Okay, it's like losing the convenience, but at the same time, you don't end up with really hard problems to solve. So I would, in a class like this, I would make that trade-off and say, okay, we'll just do certain steps over and over again. It's just mechanically you have to keep doing that every single time you run the experiment, but you won't have to deal with configuration file issues, because if those files are messed up, you can have problems like, the panels won't show up and you have no idea why it's not showing up, or X stops running because the configuration file of X11 itself is corrupted. So you won't be loading the right driver, and you will end up with a lot of issues that will take a lot of time to resolve. Okay. All right. Yep.
Which means you need to install that, do the aptitude install on the Clam AV gaming, because that's not.
With the very latest, ISO, which I don't remember whether it's already uploaded, but I think that one is maybe included already. I'll just double check. Just hold on 1 second. Clam AV. Yeah, this one is not installed yet. I made a distribution, but I have not uploaded it yet. So that part has to be done again. Even if it's installed and you go through that process, it will just tell you it's already installed. So it's not going to mess it up. Yep.
I just couldn't find the command to do it.
Oh, okay. It's aptitude install.
Right. Well, I found it because I had to
The
go
name
back
of
and
the
watch the
package.
video.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I get stuck, it says it cannot start without running Clam D. How do I get Clam D running?
Well, that's what he just said.
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
That's
I couldn't
okay.
hear it.
It's aptitude install Clam AV-DAEMON.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so when you run this command, it's going to bring in the package, and you'll get it done. This is really how easy it is to install the package, and I think it's a really great distribution system. Where you have a lot of packages. They're known to work with this particular distribution. Specifically this particular distribution, and you don't have to worry about conflicting stuff. If I install this, it's going to break that. Usually it does not happen. Okay. Any other questions related to Clam FS?
The setting up of the folders, I created them, but better from the command line, or can I just do it from the GUI?
You have to do everything from the command line.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, any other questions related to Clam before we kind of move on? Yep.
So when I go ahead and try and run it, I get a could not open lock file, permission 13 denied error.
When you try to run what?
When I try and install Clam.
You have to be root.
Okay.
Yep. So you have to change user to root first because a regular user cannot do that. So I had to run SU first to change to the root user. So then you will have the privilege to actually install stuff. But that really brings us back to the whole thing about security, because if you can actually run aptitude install as a regular user, that means you can install whatever. You can install viruses, worms, all the malicious stuff that you can install. But doing this means there's a different password, okay, and hopefully it's the one that is secure, not beer, right? Beer is not very secure, but it does give you one additional level of protection. Okay, any other questions?
The PS command.
Yep.
To show the daemon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the
PS minus A.
Okay, PS has a lot of different options, but PS-A should find a daemon. Okay, so when you run the command called PS-A, PS is the actual command, and -A is what we call a switch to enable or disable certain features. -A, uppercase A means all. Okay, because without the -A, it will only list processes that were started by this user using this terminal. Okay, that was one of the questions of one of the quizzes. So PS-A means give me all the processes. So when you do PS-A, just press the enter key. It will give you a bunch of stuff. You cannot possibly read fast enough to do that. You can use the scroll bar of the terminal to try to look for something, but it still takes a lot of time. So what I usually do is, if I know a part of the name that I'm looking for, I would use the pipe, which is a vertical bar symbol, and say grep. Grep is basically a tool that will go through a file, and it allows you to say, only return or display the lines containing the text that I'm looking for. Okay? In this class, we're not going to talk about regular expression, but if you know regular expression, the search pattern can be regular expression based. But in this case, because I know the name that I'm looking for is clamd, so I'm just going to say grep clamd, and sure enough, clamd is already running because I just installed a package earlier, and by installing the package, it automatically starts the daemon run. Okay. Is that okay? Does that answer the questions? Now the PS command, for those of you who are actually doing this for work, or you might think that this may actually be related to work, the PS command is really helpful in many ways, not only from the security standpoint, but when you want to diagnose the system and say, okay, I want to find out what is going on here, or I want to kill a process, a particular program is misbehaving, is chewing up all the resources, and I want to stop it, okay? Then you can use PS to find out the PID of that process, and then use the command kill to kill that process. Different options of PS can also give you different information. You can even tell PS to tell you how much memory is consumed by a particular process, how much processing time has been used by a certain process, what is the UID of a process, and so on. So PS is a very, very useful command. We are only using maybe 0.5% of what this command can do in this class. Any questions about that part? Yep.
Would you say the kill command is more user-friendly than in Windows? Because trying to kill something in Windows is just like screw the right.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the kill command. Okay, so the PS command is only it's kind of like ls. It displays, but it doesn't really do anything. It only shows, okay, the clamd process has a process ID, not user ID. Okay, this is the process ID of 19092. This number is going to change, so every time you restart the system, the numbers won't be the same. Okay, so if you want to kill the process, you can basically just say kill 19092. But that may not kill some processes, because when you say kill and then the process ID, this is a gentle request. This is a very gentleman approach, and say process 19092, please kill yourself. The process can choose to say, yours, I'm not going to kill myself. Okay, so in that case, you will have to say, okay, fine. Then you say -9. -9 is basically saying,
Firing.
yep, exactly. Yep, which I know politically, that's not something that I should say, but this is, like killing. You're not requesting the process to die. You're saying, I'm pulling your plug. Okay, if this doesn't get a job done, there's nothing that can get a job done. Okay, the kill command. Okay, just like all the commands that we are going to use or have used in this class. If you do a man, it will tell you 20 gazillion options for every single command. So the kill is actually a misnomer. Okay, even though most people use this command to stop a process, it's not really intended for that purpose. The kill command is really sending what we call a signal to a process. A signal is really just like that. Okay, it's really just a note. Okay, but it doesn't have to be. You have to die, okay? Process blah blah blah. I want you to stop, okay? It can be process blah blah blah. I want you to pause, okay? Just suspend execution until I tell you to resume execution. It can be that. We have seen the -USR1, okay? If you have a process that takes a long time to run, which process takes a long time to run that we have done, like at the very beginning of the semester, everybody is doing it. DD, right? So DD responds to a particular signal called USR1. So when you send a signal USR1 to DD as a process, DD would actually respond to that signal and say, okay, I have done this much work already, or this many bytes or this many megabytes has transferred. And it will give you basically a time estimate, not a time estimate, but it will give you a transfer rate up to that point, so that you can look at those numbers and go like, oh, I guess we have 2 more minutes to go, or something like that. So that's what the kill command actually does. It sends a signal. But some signals are more significant than other signals. So when we use a dash option, which is this one here, the 9 is really a signal. Okay, it's one particular signal. And the signals are probably listed in chapter 2 of the kill command. This is the other thing that you probably want to learn if you are planning to use Linux, in the long run, is the same word, like kill in this case. There are 2 chapters of the man pages that has the name kill. Okay, so when you just say man kill, it will pick up the first one. But there's actually a chapter 2 that also has a kill command or a kill topic. So to look at the second one, you have to say man to kill, okay, which is kind of funny. But it basically brings up the second chapter, or the kill topic from chapter 2. Man 7 undocumented. Okay, so there's none over there. Okay, there's another way to use that. -K is searching for keyword. So this will locate all topics in the man page dictionary that has kill in it. So there's kill all, and you can see that well, unfortunately the signals is not listed here, so I cannot find that one, unfortunately. But anything you cannot find here, you can still find on the internet. So now you can say kill signal table. Okay, this will give you a list of all of the kill signals. And there we go. This is it. So common kill signals include hang up, which is 1, interrupt from keyboard, which is 2. That's the same thing as Control-C when you run the command on the command line. And 9 is called a kill signal. When you say kill without a -9, it is using the termination signal, which is 15. Okay, so if you say kill -15 and then process ID, it's the same thing as saying just kill and then the process ID. It's a termination request, which the process can choose to ignore. Okay, most processes will not ignore the termination signal. Most will do some cleanup work, okay, like save a file so that it will exit or terminate cleanly. If they don't respond to it, it will just be an abrupt termination. But you can write a program so that it can intercept the termination request and choose not to do a single thing about it. So those processes cannot be killed with a request, they will have to be killed using the -9 option, which is basically, there's no blocking the -9. Okay. All right, so that's the quick introduction to PS and kill. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. It's all good. Okay. I'll tell you guys one more trick. Okay. There's a program called TOP, T-O-P, and TOP is a really useful command. This is the result of running TOP. It's not exactly interactive. It is in a way sort of interactive. But what it does is it shows you all the really important stuff that's going on right now. Okay. In other words, it's kind of like a text version of Task Manager. Okay. It will show you on the first line. Okay, let's go through this one a little bit here. It shows you the uptime is 30 minutes. Okay, in other words, I have restarted the system 30 minutes. I restarted the system 30 minutes ago. There are 19 quote-unquote users, but it simply means there are 19 logins. Okay, 19 shells up and running at this point. The load average is telling you, this is the short term, this is the medium term, and this is the long term average. So if this number is high, it means you have a lot of stuff chewing up processing resources. If this number is low, it means it's not. Okay, but this is based on one single core. If you have a 4-core processor and you see 1.00 here, you're only using 1/4 of all the processing resources. This should go up to 4 before you run out of actual processing resources. But this number can exceed 4. Okay, when it does exceed 4 and you only have 4 cores. Okay, what that means is now processes have to wait. Okay, they have to wait for their turn to execute, and the average length or the average queue length is now 20. Is that okay so far? Okay. Other numbers that are kind of important. This is actually the number of processes. So there are 141 processes at this point. Only 2 are running. Most of them are sleeping. Okay. A sleeping process means the process itself has determined that there's nothing to do. It's waiting for something. It's waiting for input-output of some kind. It's waiting for a packet to come in through the internet or through the network card. So it's not doing anything. That's why it is quote-unquote sleeping. The running ones are the ones that are active. Okay? And I can tell you which 2 are actually running pretty easily. This one tells you how much RAM we have in kilobytes. This one tells you how much RAM is available or free, but it's misleading, okay? Because it seems like we only have 757, less than 1 gig of RAM, available, but that's actually not true, because when you look up, how much RAM is being used for caching purposes, we are actually using 2 gigs for caching purposes. And caching is an option, okay? It makes your program, it makes your system run faster, but it doesn't have to be there. So that means these 2 gigs that we are currently using as cache can go into the free portion. So out of 3.3 gigs available, because this is a 32-bit operating system and it's not using what is the option? PAE. Okay, there's an option called PAE that will allow a 32-bit operating system to use more than 4 gigs of actual RAM, but this one does not have it. So only 3.3 gigs or 3.36 gigs were available to begin with. We are actually only using half a gig, because it's 3.3 minus 2.7, so 0.6. We're only using 0.6 gigs of RAM right now. We are using 2 gigs for caching purposes to make the system go faster. But as I said, that part can be shrunk to nothing. Okay, the system will run slower, but it doesn't have to be there. And then we have the list of processes, and this is done by how much processing, it's sorted by how much processing time or how much processing resources is consuming. So right now we can see the FFmpeg is the one that is consuming the majority of the processing resources, and guess what FFmpeg is doing? What is the one thing that is still going on right now since the beginning of the lecture? The screen recording, exactly. So the screen recording is consuming a lot of resources because it's not really just capturing, it's also transcoding on the fly. So we are transcoding both the video as well as the audio channels on the fly. And that's why it's chewing up resources, because we are encoding, I think, 10 frames per second of the screen, and then the audio is being transcoded as well into MPEG-3 or something like that. I cannot remember the actual codec, but it does take time to chew up resources to do transcoding. So that's why FFmpeg is using up resources. And next to FFmpeg is XOR. Can anyone guess what XOR does?
That's the X window.
That's X Windows, exactly. That's our display, process. And because of all the refresh, in this terminal and everything else that is going on, that's why XOR is also chewing up like 11% of all the processing resources. And also remember, this is 11% or 13%, it keeps changing, of one single core. If you have a quad-core processor, it really is only using a tiny fraction of the available processing resources. In other words, before any process has to wait, if you add up all the percentages, if it adds up to less than 400% for a 4-core processor, you're still fine. No process is actually waiting for another process to be done before it gets its turn. Okay. Are there any questions about reading top? Because this is your task manager. Okay, if you think, oh, okay, the system is slow, what is going on? Okay, PS can do it, but this is so much easier, and it's also interactive.
Can you walk by how you got each one on the percentage of memory being used? So we have 3 gigs total.
Right.
And you're saying
don't
discount the entire cache.
Correct. So this amount is actually optional. It doesn't have to be used. In other words, you can put this amount back into the free portion, and the system will be running slower, but it will still be okay. So when you look at when you want to know how much RAM is actually being used, in this case, then we are looking at 3.36 gigabytes of RAM, which is the total amount available. And then you have to subtract the portion that is actually in use right now, which is, no, I take it back. So if you want to find out how much is actually in use, then you have to subtract, first one is free, okay? So that will be like 0.6 right now. So this will give you, what, 2.7? 2.76 gigs, is basically, quote unquote, not free, right? But out of the not free portion, a big chunk is being used for caching. Okay, but caching is something that speeds up your system, but it doesn't need to be done. So out of that portion, you also have to subtract that. So you end up with what, 0.6 gigs? That is the portion that has to be there, that is actually being used. Okay, because the caching is basically saying, well, I can see that you have recently used this file. I'll keep it in memory, so the next time you need this file, you don't have to go to the hard drive anymore. I have it already, quote unquote, cached. As a local copy in memory. There's no need to go to the hard drive anymore. So it does help, speed up a lot of processes, because you don't need a lot of input-output anymore with the hard drive. But if you run out, when you start more processes and you need more memory, it will just be allocating those memory from the cache. So your system performance will start to degrade, but very gradually, as you increase the number of processes and RAM that is needed to run your programs.
And this would be some sort of, this is a swap file setting.
It's not a swap file. The swap file is the last one, it's the second line. Okay. We don't have any swap files allocated at all.
At the end, it has the available memory, which is this calculation as well.
Yep. So if you subtract 0.6, which is what is absolutely needed in memory, from 3.36, you get available memory. That's basically how much is still available. But using that 2.5 gigs, this 2.5 gigs can slowly start to degrade the performance because you'll be losing some cache space. Windows has very similar concepts, but it's just reported differently. Okay. Any questions about this?
So I have an unrelated question, well, kind of related. So say you have a system with more than 4 gigs of memory.
Right?
How would you go about accessing the additional the buffer?
Well, that's a good question. It's not exactly security related, but I will show you how to do that. I'm not using that particular kernel, but basically what you're looking for is a Linux PAE kernel. You know, something that ends with PAE. So this would, let me.
So it's actually, it's not a i386 kernel, it's a.
It's 686.
Okay.
It's because the i386 processor architecture does not support PAE. So the 686 architecture
So it's
is
got
the
a cap
first
at
one.
4 gigs.
Yes, with PAE you can address past 4 gigs as a whole for the entire operating system, but each process still has an upper cap of 4 gigs, which is a lot. I mean, you know, if one process is chewing up 4 gigs of RAM, you know, that is a lot for one single process. With PAE, the entire system can exceed 4 gigs, but each process still has a hard cap of exactly 4 gigs, which is actually practically not having a limit, because it's very seldom that you have processes, one single process, that will chew up 4 gigs of memory. I mean, you can see that everything that I'm doing right now is only using 0.6 gigs, and we have 100 and something processes running at this point, or loaded in system at this point.
And this chipset has to support the 686 architecture.
That is correct. So when you look up the architecture of your processor, it has to be 686 or above in order to run the PAE version of the kernel. All right, are there any questions?
So with the Clam D running, it has the 16 billion signatures used in that memory.
That is correct. Well, that's assuming it is loading all of the definitions into memory first, right? All right, any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we're gonna move on and talk about, you know, new stuff. The new stuff that we're going to be talking about today, there are 2 things. One is encryption, and then the other one is IDS. Okay, because these 2 are kind of important topics in a way, but one is not particularly important for client computers. Okay, so I'll talk about that later. GPG is useful because this is a file-based encryption. Okay, now you can do partition-based encryption, or you can do file-based encryption. They serve different purposes. When do you use a partition encryption, or encrypt the entire partition?
High security.
High security, when there is a potential that someone can physically break in and grab your entire hard drive to try to decode the data later on, or try to look into the information on the hard drive later on, then you want partition level encryption, because now the entire partition is encrypted. You no longer have to worry, oh, is this file important? Should I encrypt this file? Is that file important? Should I encrypt that file? No, everything is encrypted. Okay? Now, but partition-based encryption is also dangerous in a way, because there's no way to retrieve the password. Okay? What happens when you forget the password of a user account? You log in as root, and then you can reset the password. No big deal. Oh, but what if you forget the password of root? You can boot up the system, okay, in the rescue mode, and then you will still be able to rescue or change the password of root. Worst come to worst, you boot with your rescue flash drive, then you can go in and change the password of the install system itself. Okay, so those are not really that big of a deal. Okay, forgetting the password of an end user or even the root user account is not a big deal. You can always go recover that. If you encrypt the entire partition and you forget the password of that encryption, your entire partition will be lost. There's no recovery. Okay, I have come close to doing that a few times. So I know, okay, because when they ask you, oh, what password do you want to use to encrypt the partition, I just randomly thought of something, type it in twice, of course, and then, because how often do you reboot a computer in Linux? How often do you have to reboot a computer when you're running Linux? Not very often.
But the way we run it a lot.
Well, the way we run it here, yes, okay, that's true, okay, but this is the exception to the rule, right? Okay, even when if you install, okay, if not running out of a live environment, if you install Linux onto a laptop computer, and most people think with a laptop computer you have to reboot a lot, but that's not true. When you close the lid of a laptop computer, what happens? Usually it hibernates or gets into suspend mode. Okay, hibernation means it really shuts down completely. Okay, it will save the state of everything onto the hard drive. Okay, usually the swap partition. So at that time, if you hibernate a system, you can unplug the computer, take out the battery, and wait 6 months, plug everything back in, and restart it. It will resume from where it left off. Okay, that's hibernation. It does not need electricity of any type to sustain the state, because everything is now saved onto the hard drive. Suspend, on the other hand, will consume a small amount of current, okay, because it will still be maintaining RAM, okay, and it takes a little bit of energy to maintain the content in RAM, but it's not really a lot, okay, it is just a little bit. But it does mean that if you suspend the computer, unplug it, after a few days, it will die, okay, because RAM, you will run out of battery. When you run out of battery, the RAM cannot maintain its configuration, then the safe state in memory will be lost. But the advantage of suspend is
It's quick.
it's fast. It is really, really fast. You pop the screen open, in a fraction of a second, you get back to where you left off. But if you hibernate, it will take some time because it has to spin up the hard drive, and it has to load everything from the hard drive to configure your network card, your hard drive control, well, not the hard drive controller, but your USB controller and everything else. It has to restore the state of all the chips, all the devices from the hard drive. So it takes a little bit longer to do it. Okay. All right. Which also brings up the question, in terms of computer security for a client computer, do you think most laptop computers are client computers, or do you think they are mostly server computers? If you have to put a label on a computer, okay, because sometimes it's a hybrid, it's partly client and partly server, but if you have to label it one way or another, how would you label most laptop computers? They're client computers, okay? So on client computers, what type of sensitive information may be on the client computer, especially if you suspend the computer?
Unencrypted passwords.
Okay, even, yeah, passwords that are actually saved in Firefox, those are basically completely exposed. Okay, so I personally never store passwords using my browser. Okay, just none whatsoever. But the worst part is what happens if I do something like this. Okay, well, I can use Moodle as an example, right? So right now I have logged into Moodle. Okay, it is running a particular session. I suspend the computer, and then somebody stole the computer, open the screen again, and let's assume that I do not have any passwords to protect the computer. What do you think that person can do at that point? Is this session still active?
Yeah, if they're in suspend, they can go right where you were at.
Yes.
You're already logged in. But if you hibernate, it kind of like softly, you have to log back in with hibernate.
Well, but logging back in depends on how you configure the power options. You can tell the power manager not to require password to sign back in when you power up, not even from hibernation. So you have to set up the power manager accordingly to request the password when you power up the computer. So those are the things that can be dangerous when you're dealing with a client computer, is because you have an active session already. Okay? Are there any questions about that? It's not in the notes, but since we are on that topic, I just decided to bring it up too. All right. So getting back to encryption, okay, partition-based encryption is really hard to set up after the fact. In other words, if you have a running system, okay, you have installed Linux, it's already running, and you decide, hey, I want this partition to be encrypted. It's really hard to do after the fact. It can be done, but it's going to be difficult, okay? But when you first install a system, especially with Debian, and I think Ubuntu has changed to that option as well, you can actually set up a partition encrypted by default. From the get-go, it's already encrypted. So then you have the entire partition encrypted, and you don't have to worry about encrypting a single file. But disk or partition-based encryption will only help if your computer is off and somebody has to reboot from the beginning. If your computer is already running, disk-based or partition-based encryption is not going to do you much good. Is that making any sense? Okay. All right. So, but GPG is a different story because it's file-based encryption. So I wrote a few slides, for GPG encryption, and GPG by the way stands for GNU Privacy Guard. Okay, that's GPG. So out of this one, you will see most of the instructions and the concepts involved in GPG. So GPG is key pair encryption based. We talked about that already, like 2 weeks ago. Does everybody still remember what is key pair encryption? You have a public key, you have a private key. Okay, that's basically the idea. You use one key to encrypt, you have to use the other key to decipher. Okay. So that's key pair encryption. This will include the instruction to generate a key pair, because the first thing is, how do I get a pair of keys? How do you cut the keys? So as it turns out, you have one simple command to do it. Okay, GPG --gen key. That's all you need. And I believe GPG is already installed into the live distribution, so I'm going to give it a try. If you are doing this, you want to do it as the end user who will eventually own the key pair. So you just use the regular user and say GPG --gen key. Press the enter key. So it's already installed. It will ask you all these questions. So before we answer these questions, in the terminal, we'll go through those topics in the slides. The first question you have to answer is, what is the kind of key? So you can see the question here is, please select what kind of key you want. Now this may look really kind of difficult to answer because most of us do not know the ciphers, okay, that are available. The recommendation usually these days is to choose the second option and not the first option. What is wrong with RSA encryption? How many people read news about the RSA?
I'm not sure what it is, but I know the acronym.
Okay, well, RSA is the initial of the 3 founding members of that company, which also set up the algorithm and the mathematical foundation of encryption. Okay, but RSA and the NSA, okay, there's a story between those 2 organizations. One is a company, a private company. The other one is a national agency. NSA is National Security Agency, I think. Yep. So you want to look it up, okay, because you want to be able to do your own research, okay, when it comes to network security or just security in general.
They can turn over the algorithm.
If you are a programmer, okay, I would say, well, being able to do your research is good. It's a good skill to have, but it's not that important, okay? Your textbook on C++ programming will have a shelf life of maybe 3 to 5 years, okay? Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, okay? But it'll be in terms of years, easily in years. When it comes to computer security, what is the lifespan of any textbook on security topics? Months at the most, right? By the time it is published, it is outdated. Because by the time it's published, the hackers know about it, the white hats know about it. It's just a matter of, oh, we just want to make sure that we don't have this exposed anymore, okay? Because hackers already know about it, okay? So that's why it is actually even more important if you're in the computer security field to be able to do your own research. So RSA, NSA, just looking for those 2 words will give you, this is coming from Reuters, this is coming from Huffington Post, Wired, PC World, and these are all reputable sources of information. Okay, maybe one of them, just one, okay, occasionally is not reliable, but combining these 4 or 5 resources, they will paint a pretty good and complete picture of what went on between the NSA and the RSA. Okay, so given that research, okay. Well, I think this sums it up pretty much. we don't need to read any more. Just read the title and we're done. It's like, okay. NSA, National Security Agency, paid RSA, which is the initial of the 3 founding members of that company, $10 million to use flawed security standard. Okay, well, at least that's the claim, that's the accusation. And what is below this picture are the usual keys, or how do you call these things? Key fobs. Okay. So basically, it's time-based. So it is synchronized, in terms of time with a server. Okay. So the device itself keeps track of time. The server keeps track of time. And this number changes. Okay. What is the update frequency? Like every few minutes or so?
No, it's seconds.
Every second?
No,
You cannot even punch in the
it's
number
probably
quickly
like
enough.
5 seconds. You have 5 seconds from the time you press the button and get a number
Really?
to punch it in, or
Okay.
it won't match.
Okay. So basically, this is time synchronized with the server, and every 5 seconds, if you press a key, it will give you a number, but that number is only valid for a few seconds. Okay, after that few seconds, that number, a hacker can write that number down, but it's useless after a few seconds. Okay. But how do these numbers come up? That's the question. Okay, how does this device know that this is going to be the password that the server is going to recognize at exactly that moment?
Don't you have to sync them?
Well, they're time synced to begin with. These, they all have really accurate, time pieces inside, so they know exactly what the time is.
It's seeding of time, right?
Well, it's not the seed. Well, the seeding part is important, but they have to be synchronized. In other words, whoever is selling these devices, okay, they're also selling the software that runs on a server, right? It only makes sense that way, because once you get something like this, except for this one, it seems like you have a USB port, but most of these do not have any interface whatsoever to connect to a computer. So who's going to tell these things, how to synchronize with the server? You cannot. It's already pre-programmed by the time you get it. Okay? But that also means, whatever algorithm they use to rotate to come up with these numbers is top secret. Okay, the seed or the how they generate the quote unquote random numbers, that is top secret, because anyone who gets access to that thing now can know exactly what number to use as the second factor to log into your account, which defeats the whole purpose of having these devices to begin with. Is that okay so far? Just the general idea, not the math behind how these numbers are actually generated. Okay? So the claim, the accusation, is the government agency NSA paid RSA, which is the company who manufactured these devices, $10 million. The amount is not relevant, to use flawed security standards. Okay, when it says flawed security standard, what does that mean?
Somebody found a way in.
There's a backdoor. Okay, there's a way to hack it. Okay, but why would the NSA, which is not a hacker organization, okay, this is not from a foreign company, foreign country, okay, why would the NSA want to do something like that?
They don't like it when
What
they
does the
get-
NSA do? Okay, so this is getting back to
Smile at everyone.
this is getting back to the legality stuff, the ethical stuff of computer security. So you want to look up NSA, okay, and I'm pretty sure they have me on their file already because of looking at all these keywords,
Sure.
so it's going to trigger all of the alarms, I'm put onto like 20 gazillion lists to watch, okay? Okay, so just look at it, just read the mission of the NSA, okay? The NSA CSS core mission are to protect U.S. national security system and to produce foreign signals intelligence information, okay? Which means if they suspect something bad is going on, they want to know about it first, okay? So how would this relate to the other tab that we have already opened? So the mission statement of the NSA and this accusation, how can you relate those two? What would you do if you are the head of the NSA and you are charged with the responsibility and say, if any terrorist organization has any type of communication, you are the person responsible. If there is a terrorist attack and they communicate and you did not warn us about that, it is your fault. Your fault. Okay, so what would you do as the person with that responsibility?
Demand the algorithm.
You would put holes or backdoors into encryption schemes so that if you need to, you can use those backdoors to hack into the systems, and you can say, oh, let me check your email server and see if I can find anything suspicious, right? That's the reason. Now, but why is this bad?
Come on, you've watched 24, right?
24 or the original.
And you know that all that stuff, when they called Microsoft and asked for all the backdoor keys, that was true as true could be.
For those of you, exactly, okay, but the very first movie or the very first media thing that talks about this kind of thing, as far as I can remember, is
Sneakers, yeah.
Yep. Excellent movie, you know, which by today's, okay, it's not a movie. That makes it a little bit more relevant, okay? It's a 1992 movie, okay, really old by today's standard. But the issue that they are dealing with, don't look at the technology, okay? It's really archaic. It's like, wow, who's gonna use that, right? But if you look at the issues, you know, that are basically, you know, in this movie, it's still relevant today, okay? If you, for those of you who have not watched the movie, I'm not gonna spoil the movie, but if you watch the movie, you will realize, hey, these guys are supposed to be on our side. Okay, but they seem to be doing something that is against us. Okay, and it brings up the whole issue of, you know, the deal between NSA and the RSA. Okay, so you want to watch that because, you know, that really gives you an idea of the legality stuff, you know, the ethical issues and everything else that is related to computer security. How much can Big Brother know about your stuff? Okay, you know, can it be intrusive? Well, how intrusive? Okay. There are people who say that, you know, now we have the surveillance ability, the processing power, so they can monitor every conversation on every single phone line. So if you mention certain keywords, you know, it will flag the system. If you mention it a few times, it will definitely put you on the list. All right. So getting back to this issue here, so do not pick option 1. if you're really, you know, going after encryption and privacy, do not go for option 1. So I would pick option 2. Encryption key is between 1024 or 1024 and 3072 bits long. So what is the trade-off? Okay, the recommended key size is 2048. So what is the trade-off between a key size that is 1,000 bits versus 3,000 bits? What are the two factors, and what am I trading?
Decryption time is the larger.
Speed versus strength. Exactly. That's exactly it. If you choose 3072, you have an encryption key that is really, really strong. Okay, which means it is practically impossible to crack it without the access of supercomputers. And even with supercomputers, it will still take some time to do it. But the trade-off is whoever is receiving this file from you will also have to take more time to decode or decipher that file. So that's the trade-off, okay? And also, the longer the key, the more time it will take to cut the key, quote unquote, cut the key, okay? Because cutting the key is basically finding a number that fits certain requirements. It has to be really random based, okay? And it has to be prime numbers. And if you make the key really long, it takes much longer time to cut that key. If you pick a smaller key, or if you pick a shorter length of key, then it won't take as long to cut that key. Okay. Now, when I did this experiment a long time ago, like 2 years ago, it actually took quite a bit of time. Okay. Now, this is the fun part. When you press the enter key, it will ask, you know, okay. After we answer all of these questions, we'll get to that part. Okay. So now it's asking you, when is the key going to expire? Okay. 0 means it won't expire, and you can specify in days, weeks, months, or years whether the key or when the key is going to expire. Okay, do you want a key that expires? That's the first question. Because if you have a key that expires, that means after the expiration, you have to cut a new pair of keys, which is not a big deal. But remember, this is key pair encryption. There's a public key that you have to let everybody know. So if you cut the keys again because the old key has expired, you will have to update everyone. This is my new key. Use the new key instead of the old key. Okay? So there are cases where this is important, okay? Especially when you have potential exposure of your key. You know that, okay, what I'm doing over the next 5 days, can have a lot of exposure. Then you might want to set the expiration date to a week. Okay, so after those 5 days, this key will automatically become invalid. Okay, so at that point, people can no longer decipher your file because it's no longer valid. Okay, but in general, most people will pick 0. They don't want the key to expire. Key does not expire at all. This is correct. You need a user ID to identify the key. So what this means is you have to use this particular text here to identify the username and also the email address of that key. This is what it uses in order to, when you do encryption, when you send, we'll talk about this later, okay. Let me just reverse the question, okay. Let's say between David and I, okay, he has a key pair and he sends me the public key, okay. So when I send something, that needs privacy to David, I would have to use David's public key to encrypt the content, and he would use the private key to decipher it. The private key is not the issue. I only have one single private key. David only has one single private key. But I might have like 200 public keys to keep track of because all the people that I know want me to send encrypted content. Is that making any sense? So even though I have one single private key that I use to decipher messages sent to me, okay, when I send something to other people, I might have 200 people that I know, and each and every single one of those people has a public key that I own in order to encrypt content to those people. Is that okay? So now the question is, how do I tell GPG I am sending this content to that person? So go to the key chain and retrieve the public key of that person, the email address. Okay? That is why it is important to identify or to have a user ID to identify your key. Internally, GPG has a kind of like a digest, kind of random sequence of zeros and ones, okay, to identify each key. Can you remember that key? No. So that's why we have to use something that's easier for us to remember. So this one is just based on my real name. Okay, so type your real name here. Email address, I'm going to use my school address here. Okay. Comment doesn't have to be there. Okay, it's optional. Okay. So I say school stuff. Okay. And I say, okay, this is all I need. Now I can optionally enter a passphrase. In other words, this is a second line of defense. Okay, if someone somehow ends up, owning or possessing your private key, if you set up a passphrase, that person will still have to answer this question in order to make use of your private key. But this is a second line of defense because if you lose that file, the private key file to begin with, that's a big exposure already. But this basically gives you one last line of defense to protect against somebody being able to decrypt content that is sent to you.
And if this request is hashed or something and embedded in the key?
This is embedded into the private key itself. Okay. Yep. So you can specify a passphrase, or you can choose not to include a passphrase. If you choose to include a passphrase, you lose some ability to use GPG. Because when GPG needs to decipher a file, and the private key itself has a passphrase, it always interactively asks you to enter the passphrase. There's no option to specify the passphrase as a part of the command line. So you have to think about that first, okay? Am I doing something with this key pair where I want to automate something? Okay? If your answer is yes, I want to automate certain things that I want to do with the private key of this key pair, then the answer is leave this blank. Do not specify a passphrase. On the other hand, if your concern is, well, I'm always going to be there, okay? When I decipher a file, it's never being done by a script, I'm always going to be there, then you can specify a passphrase as your second line of defense. Okay, so there's a little bit of trade-off here, okay? Whether you want to have the second line of defense or whether you want the convenience to be able to script the deciphering or the deciphering of a file. I'm going to specify a passphrase here. Okay, I'm just going to choose LIVE live. Okay, and repeat the passphrase. And this is the fun part. Okay, let me just kind of read this part here. We need to generate a lot of random bytes. And how does the system now complains? Okay, so the system is basically saying there's not enough stuff going on that is random. Okay, now if you think about it, okay, what kind of thing is random on a computer? That's not a whole lot. Okay, if you are not doing anything, there's not really a whole lot going on inside the computer. It is not timing based. That's not time based. So that means if you're not moving your cursor, if I don't think it makes use of the audio input because that's kind of random too. Okay, but it doesn't make use of those. It only makes use of keyboard and mouse activities to basically say, okay, I'm going to use those events to help me randomize the key. Okay, because the more randomized it is, the less likely it is for someone to crack it, right? So that's why it complains and say not enough. It used to say entropy. Okay, I guess a lot of people do not understand what entropy is and not understand what to do about it. So now they changed the term to random bytes, which is a fairly easy thing to do. Please do some other work to give the OS, the operating system, a chance to collect more entropy. So one thing we can do is to do more mouse-related activities. There we go. You just have to do something, so it will. Okay, now it's all done. But if you stop doing stuff, GPG will stop cutting the key. It's basically waiting for you to do something so that it can get that randomness to cut the keys. Is that okay? Does everybody understand the concepts? Okay. So now we have a key already generated. Where's the key? Well, the key is not trustdb.gpg. That's not the key. Let's go into the folder called .gnupg. Okay. What do you think is the permission setup of that folder? Just kind of guess. I mean,
Hidden.
Sorry?
Hidden. Hidden.
Hidden. Okay. Well, it's a hidden file because it starts with a dot. But to discover hidden files is not that hard because you just have to say ls-a, lowercase a, and it will show all the hidden files. So that by itself is more so that it doesn't clutter up your directory than to protect itself because the ls-a will reveal all of those files anyway. But what about the permissions?
700.
Okay, 700. Okay, which means RWX for the user owner and then no permissions whatsoever to everybody else. So let's go check it out. And you are absolutely right. Okay, so we can read the permissions here, and it basically says the user owner of this folder has read, write, and execute, or execute in this case is traverse. Remember, it's a directory, so X is actually traversed into the directory. But everybody else has no access whatsoever to this folder because there is one file in this folder that is super important. Okay, so let's go to that folder and find out what is in that folder. Okay, just by reading the names of these files, which one do you think is the one that is? Oh, that's kind of important. Private keys is one, and secrain.gpg is the other one. That one is not, doesn't seem to be important, but it is. Okay, trustdb.gpg is basically the web of trust. That one is important, but not as important. Pubring.gpg is just a key ring of public keys, so that one is not really that important.
Those are the ones you've sent out.
No, it's a key ring. Okay, so basically, if you have 20 friends that you know and they all want you to have, each one has a public key, it's your keychain.
Oh, it's the public keys you receive.
the public keys that you have received, and each one is quote unquote indexed by the email address of whoever owns that key. So that way, when you need to encrypt something and send it to somebody else, you can say GPG-E for encryption, but then you can specify the email address as the person that you're sending to. Then GPG knows which public key to use to encrypt the content. Okay, very good. So now let's go back to.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Your directory at the back, at the end, it has a $sign. Mine has a pound sign. Why?
Because
not?
you're probably using root at this point. Are you using root account?
Yes.
Okay.
That sucks.
Well, you can exit. You know, that's easy to get out of.
No, but I think my directory isn't root, or is it not?
Well, then, no one says root cannot have its own, key pair, GPG encryption. I mean, in fact, sometimes that's really important too. So it's okay. It's just that what I'm doing here is not your actual homework assignment. I'm just illustrating the commands to do.
I know. I just want to do it with you because that's how I'm going to learn how to do it. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's still the same process. Root can certainly have its own key pair. Okay. All right. Are there any questions up to this point? Let me just ask you and find out whether it gives you the pound sign as the prompt.
I'm in root.
Yeah, it does. Yep. Yep. So the pound sign is an indicator that you have logged in as root. All right. So we have gone through these topics already: key size, expiration date, user ID, passphrase, and where are the key files. Okay, so everything is explained here just the way we saw them. So now we are basically done with this section. Moving on to the next one. This is how we do encryption. Okay, to encrypt a file test.txt, one way to do it is to do it using this particular method. GPG-E, the dash E here, is telling GPG, hey, I want to encrypt something. Okay, what am I encrypting? Well, remember this is the redirection symbol. We have already explained what is the greater than, because that it redirects the output. This is redirecting the input. In other words, if I do not have a redirection from the input file test.txt, GPG will basically wait for me to type everything that it is supposed to encrypt. But if I have a file already containing the stuff that it is supposed to encrypt, I can use the less than symbol as a redirection symbol. So I'm basically telling GPG and say, encrypt everything in test.txt. What about the output? Well, the redirection to the output is test.txt.encrypted. That is the output of this file. When this runs, it will first ask you who is the recipient of this content. So you type the email address of the recipient, not you yourself, okay? And then it will use the correct public key of your key chain to do the encryption. Is that okay? But occasionally you want to send something to yourself. In other words, you want to encrypt something that only you can decipher. Why would you want to do something like that?
Passwords or something, like you say.
Okay, passwords,
Bank accounts,
personal stuff, and you are uploading that to where?
to your email account with multiple.
Exactly. Okay, that is the whole point. Okay, because we all want to have some kind of backup of important stuff that we have, right? Okay, so let's say it's your tax return. Okay, the TurboTax return, which is important, right? You don't want to lose it because if the IRS comes back and say you owe some money, you want to know what you filed, right? But yet at the same time, you don't want it to sit on your internal hard drive as a regular file, because if someone does get into your system, they go after those files first. Okay, so what do? You can encrypt the file. But after you encrypt the file, you still have to worry about hard drive failure, because hard drives do fail. Okay, you don't want to lose all those important files when your hard drive fails. So what do? You attach the TurboTax file you attach it to your email and send it to yourself. Okay, so you're basically abusing Gmail as a backup device. But then you worry because if someone hacks into my Gmail account, or if an employee at Gmail is going through my stuff, they will have my TurboTax return. I don't want that to happen. So what you do is you do this. You take the input as the TurboTax file, encrypt it, send it to yourself, the encrypted version, right? And then you delete the unencrypted one from your hard drive. So now, yes, it is sitting in Gmail, but it is encrypted. So unless somebody has your private key, it would just be gibberish.
Okay, so the file sitting in the, wherever I sent it,
Yeah,
it's encrypted.
it's encrypted.
I
Well,
go to
if you
attach it.
but you have to remember to send the correct file, right?
Yeah.
If you send test.txt, it is not encrypted. But if you send test.txt.encrypted, that will be the result of encryption. So that is the safe file to send.
And then when it goes to attach, it will check to make sure that the same owner, the same user, the same UID is requesting the attachment.
Well, let's do this. Let's find out. Let's do this entire thing. As a chain. Okay, so this way you can see from one end to the other end. What we are going to do with this. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go back to here, and I'll just take one of these files as an important file. Okay, I'm just going to randomly pick one file. This is called worddone.tar.gz, which is actually just a homework file in some of my other classes. But let's just say this is my tax return file. Okay, this is something that I want to back up, but I want to make sure it is, there's privacy. Okay, I don't want other people to actually be able to read the content of this file. So what I do is I run the command gpg-e, okay, redirect from worddone.tar.gz, that's the input file, and then redirect to the output, which is worddone.tar.gz encrypted. And by the way, the extension encrypted is entirely up to you. Okay, you can say encrypted, you can say secret, you can say do not open. Okay, you can choose whatever you want. Okay, because Linux is not extension sensitive. Okay, you can name the file with any extension as long as you type that name correctly the next time, it will still work. Okay, but I just like to use encrypted here. Press the enter key, and the first thing GPG asks is, well, potentially you have a keychain of many users, many public keys, so it's asking whose public key should I use to encrypt this file. It doesn't quite say that, but that's what it's asking. Okay, well, since this is intended for myself, well, my future self, right? So I have to use my own ID for this purpose. So my ID, if I remember correctly, is ont@arc.lawschools.edu. Press the enter key, and it asks, so it retrieved it correctly, okay? Because you can see that it retrieved that particular key from the keychain correctly. Now, if I have other people who also should be able to decrypt, to decipher the file, you can add additional people. Okay, I have no idea how it can actually track all those people within the same encrypted file, but you can, okay, which is kind of interesting.
So
But
did you
since
type your name or just the user ID?
I typed my email address.
Oh, your email address.
Yeah, this is what I typed.
Sorry.
Yeah. So this is one way to identify a user. Okay, but on top of that, there's this kind of gibberish thing, FED948E4. That is the actual ID of that key. But I cannot remember that. I can remember my email address. So for people, for the most part, we just use the email address as an ID. All right. So I will press the enter key with an empty line because this is the only intended recipient. Press the enter key. It's now done. Okay. So there are two things I want to do. I want to do an ls worddone.tar.gz, and I'll put an asterisk after that as a wildcard because I want to see how those two files compare to each other. The first one is unencrypted. It has a file size of 2,800 something bytes. The other one is encrypted. It's a little bit longer, okay, which is normal. Okay, when you encrypt a file, it is usually longer or bigger than the original file, but not by much. It's what, 600 bytes or so bigger. So it's an increase of 20%-ish, okay, 25 maybe, okay, 22, 23%. So it's not too bad. It does make the file slightly bigger. So now I can send the encrypted file to myself, then I can delete the unencrypted version from my hard drive. Okay. But you do have to understand, when you delete a file, it doesn't mean it is gone. It is simply marking the sectors on your hard drive used to store that file to say, oh, this can now be used again to save another file. But until such time you reuse those sectors to store another file, the actual raw data will still be in those sectors on the hard drive. So anyone with a hard drive scanner can potentially look at all the different sectors, and they can identify things that look like they belong together, and they can still be able to string things back together to recover the file that you think you have deleted. So you have to be careful about the delete command, and this is regardless of the operating system, and regardless of the file system. You can be using FAT32, NTFS, extension 2, extension 4, Riser FS and whatnot. They all have a potential of being a file after deletion can be recovered. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So right now I have the encrypted version. So the next thing is, if you don't want GPG to ask you interactively about the recipient, you can use the -R option. So in this case, the ID is A Turing. Okay. So in my case, I can use. Let me just do this. And I can say -R, which is the name of the recipient. I'm not sure whether I can do that. Yep, okay, so I just need a part of the email address. As long as it is enough to identify the user, it will just take it. Are there any questions about the GPG command itself for encrypting purposes? No questions? Okay. Now GPG, just like most commands in Linux, can use the pipe symbol. So it can take the input that is the output of another command. And just the same, the output of GPG can also be used as the input of another command. Okay, now that makes it possible to chain or link multiple commands into one single one, so you can do several tasks on one single line of command.
Like if we wanted to encrypt an entire folder or multiple files, right?
On another computer.
Okay.
Okay, I'll show you one command that can do that. Okay, the actual command may not run, but it is the same concept. Okay, SSH. So SSH orient@power.lostwindows.edu, which is the server. Okay. Now remember, with SSH, which is a remote terminal program, you can also specify a command to run. Okay, in other words, after I sign into Power, the Power server, it's not going to be interactive anymore. It will just run the command that I have now enclosed in double quotes. Okay, so the command that I'm running remotely, this is actually relating to something that we talked about before. So I would say, okay, run this command, tar czvf home/orient/secrets and close. Double quotes. The V probably does not need to be there. Okay, so let's just take a look at this command so far. Okay, it's a long one. SSH is the name of the client program to sign into a different system, so I can run certain commands remotely. Where am I going to as what user? The username is orient, and then the server is identified as power.arc.lostwindows.edu. What do I want to do after I sign in? If I don't specify the double quote stuff, it's going to be an interactive session. But if I specify the double quotes, it will run that command. What does that command do? Well, tar is just like zip in Windows. Okay, it creates an archive. So C is for create. Z is the not encryption, but compression mechanism. Okay, there are two to choose from. There's gzip2, and there's also bzip as an option. Okay. So this is choosing one of the options. This is the less compute intensive one, but it doesn't do as good of a job. But it's not important. F says, okay, what is the file? What is the output file? Now the special file called dash, which is the minus symbol, means don't save it to an actual file. Make the output the actual output of this command. So if I don't do anything otherwise, it will just give me a lot of gibberish as I run this command. Because the file is just spewing out stuff in this terminal. Okay? And then I specify where I want to do the archiving. That's the path to the folder where I'm saying archive everything in this folder into a single tar file. Okay? But that tar file is not encrypted at this point. this command is being run not on this computer, but on the power server.
So
Is that
you're-
okay?
You're remote shelling it,
Yep.
and you're telling it to zip whatever folder you've addressed.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if someone is sniffing the traffic, out of and into this computer, it's not going to be a whole lot of use because SSH itself, the first S stands for secure. So the communication between this box and the power server is encrypted. So people can sniff traffic all day long, but nothing is going to be in plain text. Okay, so the communication itself is secure. But now I want to tag on something, because let's say this computer is not very secure and I cannot trust the system administrator of this computer. So what I will do next is to say, take whatever is the output of the previous command and turn it into the input of the following command. Okay, what do you think is going to be the following command?
What does the R mean?
Recipient.
Oh, recipient.
Yes. So now I'm piping, the output out of the SSH command, which is running tar as an embedded command remotely, and say, take all that output and immediately, don't store it locally because I don't trust this file system. I don't trust the system admin of this computer. Encrypt everything immediately into using the key of OINT. But hold on the second tag. If you don't trust the system admin of this box, isn't this something that's bad because you'll be exposing a key that is used for encryption? Is that bad or not? What do you need to encrypt? Well, there are two keys, right? I got two keys. Which key do I use to do the encryption? They both start with a P, so which one is it? The private key or the public key? I only need the public key to encrypt. Is it okay for someone to know my public key?
Sure.
Yeah. So the key is, no pun intended. So the key to making this thing secure is if you need to do encryption on a computer that you cannot trust, just don't expose your private key. That's all. The public key will still be okay because you just need the public key to do the encryption. Everybody can know your public key. Okay? So now I have the encryption specified, and finally I'm ready to save it. Okay, so now I can say, power backup.power.tar.gz.encrypted. So I have wrote everything onto one single command. Remote into another system, run the tar command to create an archive, but do not store the archive itself. Immediately turn the archive output encrypted and then store that into this file system. Well, that's just one of the things we can do. I mean, the way you can embed and link one command to another command in Linux gives you a great deal of flexibility. You can just basically do all of these chains there, and just do whatever you want. I mean, well, not whatever you want, but there's a lot of flexibility as to what you can do with one single line of commands. Is the concept getting across, not the syntax or the specific switches of this command, but the concept? Okay. Do we have that problem that we mentioned before? Is the power server, is someone on the power server, can that person get my sign-in credential onto the power server? There's no exposure. Does that make any sense? Okay, there's no exposure on the server, on the power server itself. The exposure is on this side, but not the other side, because I'm signing in to the other side, right? So the other side would have all the passwords and user accounts on this side has no exposure on the power server. Someone on the power server cannot figure out my login password on this side, on the client side. So we mentioned this before. We mentioned this in like about 2 classes ago, of how not to expose the credential to the file system that is actually storing the backup. This is how it's done.
Because you're not requesting it from the server, power server. You're not
Oh, yeah,
trying to pull the files.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm just signing into the power server. run this command, and immediately encrypt the content of whatever it sends back using a secure connection on the network. So is that okay so far? But you can kind of see how all those concepts relate. Okay, they're all related. All right. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, once I get the file, what do I do with it to decipher? -D for decrypting or deciphering. Okay. So once again, if you do a -D, it will use your private key to do the deciphering, because that's what the deciphering needs, is your private key. Okay. If you have a passphrase, okay, this is just I'm just reading this out aloud here. If you have a passphrase set up when you set up your private key, it will prompt you for the private key. And as far as I know, there's no way to specify the passphrase without using the interactive code, which is kind of a pain, but at the same time, it's a really good second line of defense, because there's no way you can actually do this with a script. You cannot lose your passphrase because it is a part of the script. It's always interactive. Are we still doing okay so far with GPG? But right now, the only thing I have demonstrated is how to encrypt something so that I can decipher it later, which is useful. Okay, there's no doubt that that is useful already. So the next thing, I'm not sure whether it's on this document or not. I think it's the next document. Okay, so deciphering, managing the private key, how to apply nifty commands. Yeah, so I basically talk about how do you can chain commands, to accomplish something with a single line instead of using separate commands. Other applications. Okay, so it's not in this slide. You can see it's kind of dated. It's 2011 when I wrote this. Okay, but it's still, everything still applies. And that really is the beauty of the command line interface, is they don't really change often. Okay, but if you use interactive, the point and click stuff. Okay, how many people have a hard time transitioning from one version of Windows to the next, as far as administration is concerned? Okay, where did they hide this setting this time, right? And they do it all the time, and I have no understanding why they would do that, because it's just punishing people who want to stay loyal and say, I want to keep using Windows, but you're making it so hard. Command line stuff doesn't change over time, not much. Okay, that's good. Okay, so getting back to the notes here, so I want to continue with this. It's 8 o'clock. I suppose we can use a 10-minute break. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, but I want to give you a preview of what we'll be talking about after 10 minutes. This is really, really cool. I think it's really cool. It's the GPG Web of Trust. Okay? It's a very important concept, okay? When you have people who know people who know people. Okay? So how do you build a web of trust using GPG? So we'll talk about that after the break. So 10 minutes, and we'll be back by 7:45. I'm going to pause the recorder. If you have any questions you want to ask that does not need to be recorded, you can do it so.